Some extra pep in that applause at the New York Stock Exchange today in celebration there. This after the Dow closed at a new record high, besting its old record, which was set in 2007 before the housing bubble burst, the markets crash, and the recession hit. It's not just the Dow. The S&P, seen as a broader measure of the markets, also within striking distance of a new record. And the NASDAQ is at its third highest level of the year. So that means nothing but good news and warm fuzzies for investors out there. But what about for the rest of us? Is there a disconnect between the success on Wall Street and the real economy for the rest of us? Well, in the latest Gallup numbers, 60% of Americans think the economy is getting worse, not getting better. We're split down the middle on whether we'll pull off the American dream. It's 50-50 on whether we think our kids will be better off than we are. Unemployment remains at 8%. That's something to worry about. And workers who have jobs, they're not loving the economy either. Just 45% of Americans who have jobs say they're satisfied with those jobs. That is a far cry from the same score on this poll back in the late 80s. And an astonishing 85% of Americans with jobs say they're either very or somewhat concerned about their ability to keep that job. Finally, for the vast majority of people out there, their jobs are earning them less now than they were before the recession hit. We've seen an increase in people making just the minimum wage, and the minimum wage, by the way, is still below the poverty line for a family of four. But this is the most shocking stat for me, this one coming up right here. Since the recession hit, average real incomes in the U.S., they're up by 1.7%. But they're not rising evenly. The top 1%, people who make more than $629 grand a year, their incomes are up double digits. Everybody else, anybody who makes less than $629,000, your income has fallen since 2009 when taken in aggregate, and fallen by nearly 0.5%. Richard, I want to start with you. What is this split? Is there a disconnect between Wall Street and...
There's been a class war going on, led by the Republicans and the 1%. And the net result is that you see statistics like that. It's appalling. Corporate profits are at a record high. Incomes are falling. Now, that's not a way a society can live. That's not either. It's not even workable in a capitalist society. You cannot have this sort of disproportionate gap between the rich and everybody else, middle class and poor, and expect there not to be political repercussions. Think of Occupy Wall Street.
But isn't the counter-argument, boy, the more you shackle these businesses, the fewer jobs they're going to be able to create? Maybe they're not everybody's dream job, but you start putting more restrictions on businesses and they're not going to hire as many people.
Yeah, in May, in a few months, we'll graduate a whole, our senior class, as we do every year. And these are young men and women, like so many young men and women across the country, who desperately feel like they're going to go out and, for the most part, not be able to find work. It's a very, very scary situation. But I really do wonder, and I would ask Richard and Dominic and you, do you have any concern about what the Obama administration did? I mean, you talked about the Republicans, but what the Obama administration did in terms of its relationship with Wall Street when it came in, and how the American public can rightly look and ask, wow, we bailed out so many of these banks, we helped so many of these corporations, and in return, unemployment is down slightly, but it is still at a fairly high level.
No one was suggesting you shoot everybody in Wall Street. Well, Dominic has suggested it, but most people don't suggest that.
I don't want to shoot him either, but I'm wondering about the Obama administration's policy towards Wall Street, which many people...
Look, you can like it or dislike it. It was an attempt to keep the financial markets alive. You can argue for it or you can argue against it. That has nothing to do with the distribution of wealth and things like minimum wage, things like taxes and revenues coming from the corporate and wealthy sector, carried interest for hedge funds.
Except don't you feel like when the American public takes tax money and bails out so many corporations, so many people on Wall Street who are now enjoying, enormous profits, that the American public can rightly say, rightly or wrongly if you look at the policy, but rightly feel, wow, so we did this, and yet in return, we've enjoyed very little.
But would we enjoy more if we had been nicer to Wall Street? I mean, if we
nicer. What if we had been harsher to Wall Street?
But by that logic, wouldn't Wall Street have been even more draconian?
Could they be much more draconian? I mean, you're saying that they're not hiring. Could they be much more draconian?
You're confusing Wall Street with the economy. Wall Street are financial houses, bankers, money lenders, things like that. Needed, important. The people, the job creators, one of the great myths of Mitt Romney was he equated job creators with the guys who were manipulating bonds in the back room at Bain Capital. If you really want to help business, helping banks is not helping business.
Is there a way to either force or seriously encourage companies to hire more and pay people more money? I mean, there's a minimum wage law which would help on the lowest possible end. But is there any way to kick corporations and say, like, you got to be a better corporate citizen?
Seems like we've been there before. And I agree with Jenny on this one. I mean, I understand what you're saying, there are two entities, but the whole point in helping Wall Street was to save Wall Street. But what happened to, they were supposed to lend money, all this money that came out of Washington that they were supposed to lend, and they're still holding on to that money. So, I mean, if you ask me, there's always been a disconnect between Wall Street and the economy and the U.S. citizen. It's almost a us versus them mentality.
It's not to a lot of people. A lot of people are scared, and a lot of people are pretty miserable with the way things are. But I don't know what you can do to improve it. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with some other debates for you, including a 911 call creating a nationwide firestorm. A nurse stands by and lets an elderly woman die, but it doesn't look as though she did anything illegal. What's going on here, and what should the penalty be? We're going to get into that and other talks at the table next.